Folks, from rising costs to global conflict, many Canadians are carrying a growing sense of emotional exhaustion. And tonight, we speak with our resident mental health expert, Greg Zed, from his home in Rothsay, New Brunswick.
And before we get started, we want to hear from you. Are you finding dealing with rising fuel and food prices on top of the uncertainty of the Mideast conflict stressing? Let us know in the comments.
And Greg, let's welcome Greg, first of all.
It's great to be here.
Nice to have you back. Greg, let's get the action going here. Greg, what are the dangers when people become emotionally overwhelmed and psychologically drained?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And I think the best way to answer that for your viewing audience is let's just take ourselves back in time. And when we talk about stress, and when we talk about stress, there have been many, many, many evolving theories about stress over the long haul. And when I say the long haul, stress has been studied for about 150 years. And scientists have been trying to determine what is stress, and obviously, how can we control stress? And the 3-minute version would be in the 80s, we had a fair amount of scientific development in Dr. Holmes, and then later, Dr. Peter Hansen, who spoke about the joy of stress. And it all led to what I haven't coined it, but I've picked up a slogan, and that is control the controllables. So in one of our previous shows, we went through a roster of stressful events, death of a spouse, money, etc., etc., etc. And we asked people, for example, in that particular segment, rate yourself. Where is your stress level? And if you score in 12-month period, say a score of a 400 score, you have an 80% chance of having a significant medical or physical or mental issue. That's how collective the science is. So the number one rule, obviously, is control the controllables. And I happen to be, as they say, the fly on the wall in your first segment. And what it resounding came back to me over and over again is that now we've got just another layer of things that we cannot control. And as a guest on your show, I actually entered a comment and I said, well, this morning when I came back from my walk and I asked Alexa to set the timer for a minute to see what my heart rate return was, I PS'd it by saying, oh, and by the way, Alexa, how are you feeling today? Because there's an example where we have Alexa in our TV, we have it in our home security, and God only knows, literally and figuratively, is Alexa picking up on everything we say and do in our own homes? We don't know. And as a result, that enters into exactly what this segment's all about. How can we take back some control of the events and the happenings in our life so that we feel that much more controlled? Now, while I take a deep breath, I will say this to your audience. In looking at Canadians just in general, we have a serious and persistent medical and mental health issue just in the general population. For example,
Mm-hmm.
we know the level of depression, anxiety, and mental illness in the general population. And so, therefore, what we have to do is we have to look at variables and try to control variables in our life that affect that. So, one easy one, for example, when we look at the impact of, say, war, it's been well documented that watching television and wars and tragedies and losses on TV in a news driven era does impact your ability to think positively and certainly to have more than fleeting a flight of thoughts. You actually figure how dangerous you are. I mean, and now with
Mm-hmm.
social media, all you have to do is look at social media and you hear about this event or that event. And in, for example, Montreal, you hear about a murder and you say, oh, yeah, but it's pretty safe, our neighborhood. And that there is a subconscious way for us to try to feel secure. We take the impact of a negativity and we say, oh, that doesn't happen. I'll give you a good example. Gary will appreciate this, being from and working quite a bit in New Brunswick. I happen to live in, as you say, Eddie, in your introduction, and thank you very much for that. I live in Rothesay, New Brunswick. What do you think almost the biggest fear in Rothesay, and particularly Kennebecasis Park, is tonight? Break-ins. Break-in.
Break-ins. Wow.
It's not in the South End where I grew up, or the East End, or in the Rifle Range, or in the North End. Okay? We have a police car at the head of Kennebecasis Park. I could see the hair on Gary's neck just rising when he hears that. A police vehicle there looking at vehicles coming in and out of the park to see if there's a strange particular car. You know, they're looking
Wow.
for a white SUV. So people here on alert. I go for my walks today, for instance, in the morning and in the afternoon for morning walk and prayers. And everyone's saying, Greg, do you think they're going to find them? They're on edge. And that is what this segment's all about, is how do we get off edge? We try to control the controllables. So Greg, who leaves his door open, never ever thought of locking it, never did this since 1978, and relatively sound mind, 42 and a half years in the mental health field without a sick day. So I think I can self-proclaim that. The courts have proclaimed me an expert. I sit back now and I have locked doors. I have deadbolts on all my doors. And I have 8 cameras that has a 360-degree surveillance. And I can tell a lady by the name of Alexa, turn the security on and turn it off. In fact, I can tell Alexa from my TV room, show me the front door. I want to see who's there when the doorbell rings.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that sophistication causes us angst. Now let's take a jump into it. What does it translate to? It's real. It's not in our imagination. We know the statistics will show you youth mental health is up 40% since COVID. We know that 80% of all family doctors will claim and check off depression and anxiety for the bulk of their family practice. We know that while ER visits are down, we know the strain on community-based services is through the roof, and waiting lists are now being used as a way to secure money. So when the federal government has pots of money to give out, they say only if you attack a waiting list. So the first takeaway midway through this session is, first of all, identify that it's real. It's real about the strain and the mental anguish that we are all experiencing. That's real. It's not false. It's
Right.
not an anxiety that we just grew up with. If anything, our security blanket is, oh, in our day, that never happened. So that's number one. Number two, what has happened in terms of our social determinants, we have been hit with two catastrophic variables that affect the mental well-being of ourselves. And that is poverty at an all-time rate. We not only have food banks now, they're corporations running the food banks. They were supposed to be set up for a short-term measure. Now every community has a food bank, food basket, call it whatever you want, but it's gone now. In fact, one the other day advertised they were doing a ribbon cutting ceremony on 25 years in business as a soup kitchen. 25 years. So this has progressed along that continuum, and there's been no reduction and no light, so to speak, at the end of the tunnel. So again, it drives home the point, it's real. Housing. When I was the director of mental health, someone had come into our office, saw 600 people a year in a community, a rural community, Sussex, very vibrant, and had lots of work, and it was very laid-back community. And they said, well, I fell on hard times. I've got this disability. I can't work, and I'm on social assistance. The provincial policy was clear. You tell me how much you make, and we will set you up so that you can go into a one-bedroom or a two-bedroom, whatever it might be, depending on the number in the family, if you pay a third of your gross income, $600-700 a month social assistance. A third of that puts you in $200 or $300, and that leaves you a little money left over for, God forbid, cigarettes. God also forbid if you'd ever want cable, food, clothing, etc., etc., etc. So we'll say the better side of $350, $400 a month for that. Today, they're building at record speed numerous houses. And they say for low income families. You know what the entry level for low income is nationally? $1,300. And then the question is raised, why are there so many tents? Why are there so many homeless people? Did you ever think affordability? That's why it's very popular now all of a sudden. The affordability clause about maybe guaranteed income for everyone. Because at $1,700 and the low rate for housing is back down to $1,000 to $1,300. Who can afford $1,300 a month for an entry level into the apartment? So there is two things. Our aging population makes it more vulnerable. We know that every 142 minutes in Canada, someone suicides. That is a wide end. We have 4,000 people that suicide. Now, whether that's a byproduct of a mental illness, byproduct of situation, byproduct of extreme stress, but I've done volumes of suicide psychological autopsies, and I can tell you, not too many of them just have one stressor. They probably had a prolonged mental health issue that either was untreated or not treated because of whether or not access to service. And the one that I can think of right off the bat, they're coming up and developing on every corner, and that is private practice. Try to get into a private practice. Unless you have Blue Cross or Medivir or Sun Life or whatever, and you only get 6 sessions, what are you going to do if you're depressed? Who are you going to call? 988. I think there's a national, and you can talk. But I'm talking treatment, access to treatment. We're underfunded when it comes to mental health. There's no Parity Act in Canada whereby mental health gets funded at the same ratio. Now, the kicker in all, and one other, the adaptation for these stressors happen to be maladaptive practice. Maladaptive practices include any practice that you or I participate in that is not life sustaining. Gambling. 15% of all suicides have a gambling issue. Okay? Wow. Sexual assault. We have what? 100 suicides a year in New Brunswick, roughly. About 10-15% are women. If you carved out a piece for women, they've all had an abusive situation in one way, shape, or form. Sexual assault, domestic violence, or child abuse. And that is why the experts in suicide are now looking at adverse childhood events, which is called ACE, adverse childhood event. We know that adverse event as a child will follow you for the rest of your life unless it's treated. So we have access to treatment. So that 5-layer or point segment is gloom and doom. So what Gary's going to ask me is, what do we do? What do we do? Because we have to instill hope. And there's 4 key elements to the positives. It's like Dr. Peter Hansen when he said the joy of stress. You have events in your life and you have things that you can control. So if you take and carve out the things that you can control in your life, they will balance out the things you cannot control. Example, I'll use a personal one because it resonates with me. We have heart disease in our family. I can't do anything about the genes. I really can't. What I can do is try to get early access, early detection, and early treatment. And I can do the don'ts to the best of my ability. Keep my weight in check. Keep my blood pressure in check. Keep my cholesterol, all the variables that cardiologists are key indicators of heart disease. Can I eradicate heart disease in the Zed family? Absolutely not. But what I can do is I can try to control the pieces that I can control, including stress. So if something's stressful, walking away or taking a breather or not paying attention to the TV or anything that makes that body feel, oh, here we go, the blood pressure's rising. Those are the kinds of active things. So what I say to my clients in the small private practice I have is 3 things. Number 1, you got to eat a balanced diet. Number 2, you have to have appropriate sleep. And number 3, in addition to looking after yourself, you have to recreate. Recreate, which means about 40 minutes for the average person, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Some people talk about the steps. They say 10,000 steps. Well, heck with the steps. Let's just say motion is lotion. Lotion. Motion is lotion. You see what I mean? If you're sedentary, I mean, bottom line is you're going to have issues. So getting back to the bigger picture that we're talking about as it relates to world wars, poverty, housing, and economic strain, take the four of them. Control the events in those four spheres that you can control. Even though hydro is going up, even though this is going up, cost of food is going up. So that's where we have to get off automatic pilot, and we got to control the variables in our life. We got to control when we use electricity. Maybe they'll get, smarter. I know they have smart meters in some provinces, but maybe we'll all get smarter, and some people are going off the grid. Some people are using power at not peak hours. And their energy people are now saying, well, if you want to do your, let's say, dishwasher, why would I put my dishwasher on at 5 o'clock? I could put it on at 10:30, 11 o'clock after the news or after the hockey game.
Mhm.
So there's one example. Food, skyrocketing, be more selective. Pick and choose. When you buy the food, make enough food, maybe for 2 meals, make a stew, I don't mean to scrimp, but just be more mentally alert and aware of where your money's going. We know the dollar for the last 20 years has been shrinking. We got that argument of salaries aren't keeping pace. Well, in the olden days, how did you keep pace? Gas now, for instance, $1.92 today in New Brunswick. And politically, people will say, well, we'll take the gas tax off, we'll do that. $1.92 a gallon. When you get in the car, do you need to go there? Or when you go in to the car, why don't you make 4 or 5 pit stops on that day you use the car? So in other words, take control of the events in your life that you can manage and plan accordingly. So it's control the controllables. The poverty issue is another thing. We know the unemployment rate has gone up. So people have to, obviously, that are working, they have to create a budget. I don't want to embarrass the three of us and say how many of us work from a budget. Probably none of us will raise our hands. We have an urge to get something, we get it.
Guilty.
We go to them, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
where's the money going? All I do is challenge you today, and instead of that 1 or 2 or 5 minutes you spend on Trump next week, bring back to the show a list, a one-pager. How did you spend your money in the last week? Write every penny that you spent, and then take a look at that and say, do you need it? Do you want it? Or is it essential? Now, some people will say, oh, well, that's getting less, or it's tightening the belt. No, it isn't. It's taking control of something that you had control of, but you didn't want to put controls on your activity and your behavior. Do you need to go into the fridge 5 times in a run of a night? Yeah, because it's my freedom. I'll go into the fridge whenever I feel like it. So think smarter.
Right.
Other thing is, and this is a key one, I believe, and maybe it's my background and it's my training, I really think that we have to look after the physical self. And that is, if we have a family doctor, that's a blessing. Follow your family doctor, get things checked out, and stay on top of your health. Health is wealth. If you don't have good health, you're going to have issues with everything under the sun, let alone the genetic things. But I'm talking about things that are within our control, like blood pressure, cholesterol, all those things that are preventable. So prevent anything, you know. I know there's a fair amount of controversy about getting inoculated with the flu. I happen to be one of the people that have these needles, and I get my flu shot. I'm not boasting, but 42 and a half years without a sick day. My wife will attest to the 34 happy years we've had married. I don't think I've been sick that often. If I had the sniffles, I had them for a day or two. I've had, God bless me, I've had good health. So the frame that I go to the doctor when I need to, I get my blood checked on a regular basis, and I try to live a reasonable life. The other maladaptive behavior, when we talk about gambling, is closely associated, and we really don't want to admit this, but approximately 6 million or 21% of people in Canada have or will suffer from a substance abuse. That's almost a quarter of the population. So our use of alcohol and drugs, and maybe the AI people are going to pick up on me, and a federal politician or whatever may pose some retribution to me, but the whole legalization of cannabis over whether it's a crime or not a crime has opened up a whole Pandora's box. And now you've got kids under the age of 25, when their brain isn't developed, that are either committed to cannabis use, committed to smoking, with all the taxes and all that with smoking, and now they got vapors out. So we've created an addiction and manifested on a whole area. And the final one that we did is with social media. The DSM-5, which is the dictionary for psychiatric disorders, which was released last year as the most current, has now put addiction to social media as a psychiatric disorder.
That's a big one.
Yep.
So go figure. How often have you seen schools battling over kids with the iPhones? They, everything is, I want it now. I have an email, I got to answer it now. And Gary knows this. I have a landline, period. And I have a cell phone in my car because my wife had 2 strokes. Okay? I don't walk around with an iPhone so that if Gary McDonald wants to know when can I do a dress rehearsal for the show tonight, I'll get around to it when I get home. And I'll go down there on the computer and say, Gary, got your note this morning? Sorry, I missed it at 10 o'clock, but it's 10:30, a half an hour later, and here's the answer. I'm ready whenever you're ready. But no, we've brainwashed people. Oh, send a text message. Someone asked me the other day, what's my cell phone? I said, why? Oh, I'll text you. Why would I take a text right now? I'm on a national podcast, Night Talk Canada. Now, if I had my cell phone sitting beside me and I got a message that I'm talking too much or rambling too much, okay, that's fair. That's a good cue. But that's not what we're using it for. We interrupt. We lose control of our time and space. We sit at kitchen tables. Each one of us have an iPhone. You know, you go into a restaurant. So it boils down to on all those variables. And I just gave some notes, and Gary also gave me some notes. When you look at it, the socioeconomic, we've covered that. We've got the low income, so we have to manage our budgets better. That's for sure. Housing and the cost of living, we have to look at what's affordable. I mean, I have people, God forbid, I hope they're not listening from my neighborhood, but they just got married 2 weeks ago and they bought 600. The entry level house in my neighborhood is $650,000.
Wow.
Raise your hands. How many people can afford to buy a house and they've just started work? Whether they have two incomes or not is irrelevant. I'm talking about the entry level to move into my neighborhood now. I bought my house for $36,000, albeit in 1978. So I'm not going to say I'm an old man now, and that was 40 years ago. But I'm just saying, what's the entry level for housing? You know, and the bank wants what, 10% or 20% down. So the government's saying, here, we'll lend you some money, so we'll cut that down to 5%. So instead of getting your mortgage paid in 25 years, you can pay for, it's like taking a car, the car dealerships are experts at it. They now give you a seven-year loan.
I know, I can't get my head around that one.
7 years, you know. Add to the factor, and then I'll sort of slow down this train so we can have a discussion. Add to it the marginal groups, the impact of people with mental illness, schizophrenia, mood disorder, anxiety, depression. Take a look at the Aboriginal community. Take a look at the study that I did in 2017 when I interviewed numerous people in the province of New Brunswick around youth suicide. Sexuality, gay, LBG, big factor. The pressure under those individuals. The phobia, even having a gay parade. I mean, we're getting a little better, but still, if you talk to that group, they feel unsafe. The amount of heroin and drugs on our street, alarming levels. So again, it comes down and boils down to trying to control the elements around us, which starts with our life, our self. And self is, if we can't control ourselves, our marriage is going to have its stressors. Then you branch out from there. And control the controllables is the answer almost. I know it sounds glib, but it's the answers to everything from housing to budget to health to addiction to social media and exposure to war. We in the 40s we learned that the people came back. We said, oh, they came back. They were shell shock. Okay, we're shell shocked every time we turn on the TV.
True.
Someone's shot. Do you see what I mean? No different. 40 years. If any, we got more sophisticated. One final comment. The sad commentary, and I'm glad that Night Talk Canada has been the first, that my knowledge, to raise the impact of existence on mental health.